Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. I'm Philip Osteen, Dean of the University of Utah College of Social Work. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the second event in this year's Grand Challenges for Social Work lecture series. My thanks to each of you for making the time to join us live, or to those of you who are watching the recording at a later time. We express a sincere gratitude to those who donated while registering. These donations will be applied to the Gerontology Social Work Endowment in the College of Social Work, which specifically supports students who plan to work with older adults or who are committed to geriatric social work. Before we get to the presentation, on behalf of the College of Social Work, I want to begin by acknowledging that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to partnerships with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. Now, as you may know, the Grand Challenges for Social Work began taking shape in 2013 as a groundbreaking project to champion social progress powered by science. It continues a decade later as a national call to action for our field practitioners and researchers to harness social work's science and knowledge base, collaborate with individuals, community-based organizations, and professionals from all fields and disciplines, and to work together to tackle prevalent social harms. Today's event aligns neatly with all of those goals, and we're excited to welcome Anne.asman, who will focus on how we challenge assumptions around aging. Anne has a master's degree in interdisciplinary gerontology from the University of Utah and is the program manager for the geriatric psychiatry clinic at the Huntsman Mental Health Institute. She has completed training in Utah palliative care education and holds certifications in community health work, dementia assist, and dementia education and communication. Her training also includes certification in dealing with dementia training from the Rosalind Carter Institute of Caregiving. Anne is the chair of the Dementia Aware Work Group for the State Alzheimer's and Related Dementias Coordinating Council and works closely with the state area associations on aging and the Utah Division of Aging and Adult Services. She co-authored the 2018-2022 and the 2023-2030 state Alzheimer and Related Dementia state plans. She is a member of the Summit County Wellness Alliance and works with multiple public and private organizations to provide care and advocacy for best practices care in geriatrics across the state. She has created curriculum and facilitated presentations on caregiving, dementia, the aging brain, and ageism, and continues to teach courses on aging for Osher Lifelong Learning. She is an active member of numerous age-related professional organizations, including the American Federation for Aging Research, the American Society on Aging, and Gerontological Society of America. Following her presentation, Anne will have about 20 minutes to respond to audience questions. So please use the Q&A button that's located at the bottom of your Zoom window to submit any questions that you may have. And with that introduction, Anne, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I know it's a long bio. I just love what I'm doing and I want to learn as much about it as I can. So that's why I keep doing everything. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. There we go.
When you hear about the aging population, who comes to mind?
There you go. We're good. You got
Is it
it?
someone like this? What about this person? Or this person? The fact is, there is no such thing as a non-aging person. We are all aging, each one of us, every day. Unfortunately, when many of us think about growing older, we tend to think about it in a negative way.
Aging in older adults. Dementia, decline,
sickness, and financial needs.
Disability, cranky, and functional decline.
various diseases and conditions. Yeah, that's the main thing, aging.
Of course, there's some decline, but the truth is that aging is a complex process that includes growth and development throughout our entire lifetime. Simply put, aging is change, be it physically, emotionally, or ideologically. Some of these changes are obvious, like growing taller or needing to use reading glasses. But other changes are subtle, and we should acknowledge how monumental they are. For example, it's easy to take for granted that our life experiences help us to better cope with challenges. We've all learned that temper tantrums are not a good way to communicate with others. Can you imagine not having learned this lesson? Our experience has allowed us to grow as we've gotten older. So why do we focus on aging as decline instead of seeing the whole story? Right now, there are very powerful societal messages about aging and what it means to be old. For example, when we see products being advertised as anti-aging, the message is that aging is ugly, aging is bad, aging is undesirable, aging is scary. This all comes back to the idea that aging is decline. These messages influence not only how we see older people, but also how we see ourselves, and that has real consequences. The research shows that a negative view of aging affects our well-being. It increases the risk of chronic illness while prolonging recovery time and can even shorten our lifespan. We need to broaden our understanding of aging and distance ourselves from the misconception that aging only equals decline. Take a minute and think about what you associate with the words aging and old. Do you think society has given these words a bad reputation? Do you see yourself as someone that is aging? Think about an older version of you.
Okay, so basically we're going to talk today about this idea of pride or prejudice and the challenge of aging populations' assumptions, which, as you heard from the opening, it can be very, very dangerous. So what the first thing I want to do is have everybody think about this question. And the answer, there's no really, there's a yes or no, but there's not really a right or wrong answer. But it is something that we need to think about. And that is, does our society value youth and children more than older adults? And it'll be great because I just think about it. Think about what your thoughts are about it. It's true, unfortunately, that in almost 5 years, we will have more people older than 65 than under the age of 5 for the first time in the history of this country. Now, baby boomers are going to make up most of this population. And I think that many of us here today are probably baby boomers. And it's interesting that we've really had since 1964 to figure out this problem of, how to take care of older adults. But it seems that it's been completely ignored for a very long time.
How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Great.
Awesome.
Just tell us your first name and your age.
My real age?
My name is Paolo. I'm 25 years old.
My name is Daniela and I'm 19.
24. 35.
31. 33.
I'm 26 years old.
What age do you consider to be old?
Late 40s.
Maybe 50.
I feel like 30 is a new 20. So I'd say like 40 is old. I'd probably say 50s.
I'd like you to show me how an old person would cross the street. Show me how an old person would send a text message. How might an old person do a push-up? What about jumping jacks? Okay, hang on. There's someone I want you to meet.
Hello, I'm Birch. I'm 66.
I am Daphne and I'm 68. I'm Dee and I'm 55.
George Bassbinder, 75.
My name is Parvati. I'm 70.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're going to give you about 2 minutes to teach each other something that you are good at.
I can teach you a jump that I do.
Okay, please.
Both of your legs go up
Mhm.
and your arm goes up and your left arm goes back to the side. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Lift 1, 2, 3. And bring it to your heart. And bring it to your heart. Add the head in. Yeah. I'm gonna try to get your balance. And raise up. Now, bring your legs and your feet up. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So when you come out of a turn, either way, you go back to that place.
Over. Now forward. Over. Yeah.
Square like this and knee up. Okay. Jab cross. Hook. And then we'll go like this, all right? 1, 2, 3. Oh.
Now, what age might you consider to be old?
Probably 80 or 90. He could just do everything that I told him to do. An age that I would consider to be old now might be 100.
Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I said in the 50s. I thought that would be okay. But when I thought about it, like,
Wait a minute. It really changed my thinking of what old is. You've taught me something today. Clearly, there's no way she's old, you know?
Now I know from today, hey, I don't look at age.
At my age, I feel like I did when I was in my 20s.
There's so many things that I still want to do. There's so many things that I can do. As long as I'm growing and learning, then age doesn't matter.
When people start stopping, that's when they start getting old.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, I'm sure you all have some thoughts about that. This is it's from AARP, it's on YouTube, and I just love it because it kind of, in its own way, dispels everything we've thought of about aging. And I realize there aren't people that are necessarily in their 80s or 90s, but I still think it's a great example of changing people's perceptions. So basically, what is ageism? And according to the World Health Organization, or WHO, ageism refers to stereotypes, how we think, prejudice, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act towards others and ourselves based on age. This is something that is really important to understand. Ageism is not just for older adults. We can be ageist the opposite way. We can be ageist in terms of people are too young or they're too inexperienced or whatever the situation may be. Come on, go. There we go. So what we're going to try and do today is to understand the challenges of ageism, of which there are many. And there are also many myths and assumptions that have been made about older adults that are just plain old not true. And I'm sure that some of you have run into them, but we're going to look into them a little more deeply here. So there are there are 5 different types of ageism. First one is internalized ageism, which is how we feel about ourselves as aging people. Ageism in which older adults marginalize and discriminate against other older people. And unfortunately, that is something that ends up happening quite a bit in our society. And it's very difficult. God, stop that. There's also implicit ageism, which is the unconscious bias, including the attitudes, feelings, and behaviors towards people of other age groups that occurs without conscious awareness or intention. This is when we don't mean it, but we say it or we do it, and it ends up being related to age. Interpersonal ageism. This is where ageist comments and behavior that happen between people when they interact. This may be negative, but can come from a positive intent. But it's still based on stereotypes. And I'm sure that at some point we have all experienced interpersonal ageism, whether it's with our children or with other members of our colleagues. There's also cultural ageism. This is everyday, invisible, profoundly ingrained, and normalized negative messages about aging and older people that are embedded in our society. And it's true that there are about, our society is probably the worst when it comes to ageism, simply because of the way our culture has developed. And most other countries absolutely embrace their older adults. They revere them. They are seen as, the most wise people that they can possibly imagine. And they take care of them all the way through their lives, even if they have cognitive impairment. It doesn't matter. They're still going to take care of them. Institutional ageism. This can be very, very dangerous. And this is where you have unfair age-based restrictions in laws, policies, and practices of public and private institutions. This can totally disrupt a person's life if they are terminated for whatever cause. And here in Utah, we don't have to terminate people for cause. However, there have been a lot of lawsuits based on people who believe they were terminated because of their age. This can get really, really sticky. And it's also dangerous when you start making laws and policies that are based on age. This person, her name is Ashton Applewhite. She is probably the foremost living expert on ageism. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting her at a conference, and she's just like the way she presents herself here. But she probably explains it better than anybody as far as why we're ageist and what we can do about it.
What's one thing that every person in this room is going to become? Older. And most of us are scared stiff at the prospect. How does that word make you feel? I used to feel the same way. What was I most worried about? Ending up drooling in some grim institutional hallway. And then I learned that only 4% of older Americans are living in nursing homes, and the percentage is dropping. What else was I worried about? Dementia. Turns out that most of us can think just fine to the end. Dementia rates are dropping too. The real epidemic is anxiety over memory loss. I also figured that old people were depressed because they were old and they were going to die soon. It turns out that the longer people live, the less they fear dying, and that people are happiest at the beginnings and the ends of their lives. It's called the U-curve of happiness. And it's been borne out by dozens of studies around the world. You don't have to be a Buddhist or a billionaire. The curve is a function of the way aging itself affects the brain. So I started feeling a lot better about getting older, and I started obsessing about why so few people know these things. The reason is ageism, discrimination and stereotyping on the basis of age. We experience it anytime someone assumes we're too old for something, instead of finding out who we are and what we're capable of, or too young. Ageism cuts both ways. All isms are socially constructed ideas: racism, sexism, homophobia, and that means we make them up, and they can change over time. All these prejudices pit us against each other to maintain the status quo, like auto workers in the US competing against auto workers in Mexico instead of organizing for better wages. We know it's not okay to allocate resources by race or by sex. Why should it be okay to weigh the needs of the young against the old? All prejudice relies on othering, seeing a group of people as other than ourselves, other race, other religion, other nationality. The strange thing about ageism, that other is us. Ageism feeds on denial, our reluctance to acknowledge that we are going to become that older person. It's denial when we try to pass for younger, or when we believe in anti-aging products, or when we feel like our bodies are betraying us simply because they are changing. Why on earth do we stop celebrating the ability to adapt and grow as we move through life? Why should aging well mean struggling to look and move like younger versions of ourselves? It's embarrassing to be called out as older until we quit being embarrassed about it. And it's not healthy to go through life dreading our futures. The sooner we get off this hamster wheel of age denial, the better off we are. Stereotypes are always a mistake, of course, but especially when it comes to age, because the longer we live, the more different from one another we become, right? Think about it. And yet we tend to think of everyone in a retirement home as the same age, old. When they can span 4 decades. Can you imagine thinking that way about a group of people between the ages of 20 and 60? When you get to a party, do you head for people your own age? Have you ever grumbled about entitled millennials? Have you ever rejected a haircut or a relationship or an outing because it's not age appropriate? For adults, there's no such thing. All these behaviors are ageist. We all do them, and we can't challenge bias unless we're aware of it. Nobody's born ageist, but it starts in early childhood, around the same time attitudes towards race and gender start to form, because negative messages about late life bombard us from the media and popular culture at every turn, right? Wrinkles are ugly. Old people are pathetic. It's sad to be old. Look at Hollywood. A survey of recent Best Picture nominations found that only 12% of speaking or named characters were age 60 and up, and many of them were portrayed as impaired. Older people can be the most ageist of all because we've had a lifetime to internalize these messages and we've never thought to challenge them. I had to acknowledge it and stop colluding. Senior moment quips, for example, I stopped making them when it dawned on me that when I lost the car keys in high school, I didn't call it a junior moment. Like I stopped blaming my sore knee on being 64. My other knee doesn't hurt and it's just as old. We are all worried about some aspect of getting older, whether running out of money, getting sick, ending up alone, and those fears are legitimate and real. But what never dawns on most of us is that the experience of reaching old age can be better or worse depending on the culture in which it takes place. It is not having a vagina that makes life harder for women, it's sexism. It's not loving a man that makes life harder for gay guys, it's homophobia. And it is not the passage of time that makes getting older so much harder than it has to be. It is ageism. When labels are hard to read or there's no handrail or we can't open the damn jar, we blame ourselves, our failure to age successfully, instead of the ageism that makes those natural transitions shameful and the discrimination that makes those barriers acceptable. You can't make money off satisfaction, but shame and fear create markets, and capitalism always needs new markets. Who says wrinkles are ugly? The multi-billion-dollar skincare industry. Who says perimenopause and low T and mild cognitive impairment are medical conditions? The trillion-dollar pharmaceutical industry. The more clearly we see these forces at work, the easier it is to come up with alternative, more positive, and more accurate narratives. Aging is not a problem to be fixed or a disease to be cured. It is a natural, powerful, lifelong process that unites us all. Changing the culture is a tall order, I know that, but culture is fluid. Look at how much the position of women has changed in my lifetime, or the incredible strides that the gay rights movement has made in just a few decades, right? Look at gender. We used to think of it as a binary, male or female, and now we understand it's a spectrum. It is high time to ditch the old-young binary too. There is no line in the sand between old and young after which it's all downhill. And the longer we wait to challenge that idea, the more damage it does to ourselves and our place in the world, like in the workforce, where age discrimination is rampant. In Silicon Valley, engineers are getting Botox and hair plugged before key interviews. And these are skilled white men in their 30s. So imagine the effects further down the food chain. The personal and economic consequences are devastating. Not one stereotype about older workers holds up under scrutiny. Companies aren't adaptable and creative because their employees are young. They're adaptable and creative despite it. Companies, we know that diverse companies aren't just better places to work, they work better. And just like race and sex, age is a criterion for diversity. A growing body of fascinating research shows that attitudes towards aging affect how our minds and bodies function at the cellular level. When we talk to older people like this, or call them sweetie or young lady, it's called elder speak, they appear to instantly age, walking and talking less competently. People with more positive feelings towards aging walk faster, they do better on memory tests, they heal quicker, and they live longer. Even with brains full of plaques and tangles, some people stayed sharp to the end. What did they have in common? A sense of purpose. And what's the biggest obstacle to having a sense of purpose in late life? A culture that tells us that getting older means shuffling off stage. That's why the World Health Organization is developing a global anti-ageism initiative to extend not just lifespan, but health span. Women experience the double whammy of ageism and sexism, so we experience aging differently. There's a double standard at work here, shocker. The notion that aging enhances men and devalues women. Women reinforce this double standard when we compete to stay young. Another punishing and losing proposition. Does any woman in this room really believe that she is a lesser version, less interesting, less fun in bed, less valuable than the woman she once was? This discrimination affects our health, our well-being, and our income, and the effects add up over time. They're further compounded by race and by class, which is why everywhere in the world, the poorest of the poor are old women of color. What's the takeaway from that map? By 2050, 1 out of 5 of us, almost 2 billion people, will be age 60 and up. Longevity is a fundamental hallmark of human progress. All these older people represent a vast, unprecedented, and untapped market. And yet, capitalism and urbanization have propelled age bias into every corner of the globe, from Switzerland, where elders fare the best, to Afghanistan, which sits at the bottom of the global Age Watch Index. Half of the world's countries aren't mentioned on that list because we don't bother to collect data on almost 2 million people because they're no longer young. Almost 2/3 of people over 60 around the world say they have trouble accessing healthcare. Almost 3/4 say their income doesn't cover basic services like food, water, electricity, and decent housing. Is this the world we want our children, who may well live to be 100, to inherit? Everyone, all ages, all genders, all nationalities, is old or future old. And unless we put an end to it, ageism will oppress us all. And that makes it a perfect target for collective advocacy. Why add another ism to the list when so many, racism in particular, call out for action? Here's the thing, we don't have to choose. When we make the world a better place to grow old in, we make it a better place in which to be from somewhere else, to have a disability, to be queer, to be non-rich, to be non-white. And when we show up at all ages for whatever cause matters most to us, save the whales, save the democracy, we not only make that effort more effective, we dismantle ageism in the process. Longevity is here to stay. A movement to end ageism is underway. I'm in it, and I hope you will join me.
She is an amazingly intelligent person. She has a book called This Chair Rocks. And if you get a chance, it's on Amazon. It's not very expensive. It's definitely worth reading. And I also want to point out that we've heard now twice about change and about how aging is really boils down to change. And I think that that's where a lot of people get confused and they have difficulty with the changes. But they changed from an adolescent to a teenager. They changed from a teenager to a young adult. They changed from a young adult to someone that's middle-aged and probably has a family. So we've been changing all along, and I don't understand either why once we reach a certain age, it becomes detrimental, because it's not. But ageism can be very, very harmful. It can harm individuals, it can harm workplaces, it can harm society in many ways. Emotional stress, physical issues. People actually show signs of physical decline if they are around ageism a lot in their lives. There are a lot of things psychologically too. We start to believe them, and we shouldn't believe them. They're not necessarily true. So what is everyday ageism and how common is it? Based on, this is a study that the University of Michigan did. So based on experiences with everyday ageism among adults 50 to 80 years old, 82% experienced one or more forms of everyday ageism. 65% are exposed to ageist messages daily. 45% experience ageism in interpersonal interactions. And 36% experience internalized ageism. Those are pretty dynamic percentages. And I think if we all think right now about what, even up to this point in the day, have we experienced any ageist messages? Have we proliferated ageist messages? Think about it and think what you're doing and where you're going and how you might make some change. The other question I have for everyone is, what are you most afraid of as you are aging? I think that Ashton spoke about this, but everybody's different. Some people are terrified of dying. Some people are terrified of dying alone. Some people are terrified about experiencing some sort of physical decline, whether it actually happens or not. They're just in fear of it. Some people are, I shouldn't say some, most people are afraid of, very simply, losing their minds. And because we're living so much longer, that has really become one of the biggest issues in this country and in the world. So there's now actually a term for this, for the fear of getting old, and it is FOGO. It's just like, BOGO or fear of missing out. All of those things now have these little acronyms, but FOGO means the fear of getting old. And it starts it just starts with trepidation in the least intense version. And then it becomes more nervousness. Then it becomes full-blown anxiety. Then it becomes dread, desperation, panic, horror, and terror. And when you get up to those four at the top, that's when older adults begin to have suicidal ideation, because they absolutely dread getting any older. They're desperate to either end their lives or feel better. And in many cases, they will do things that probably aren't really acceptable. But most of the people that we see at Huntsman Mental Health Institute in our geriatric program are somewhere in that between anxiety and dread. And it's not easy, but it's a great service that we can do to get them out of that mindset and make them understand that what they're going through, for the most part, is extremely normal and should be talked about. And they should learn more about it. Education, as we all know, is the key to learning. And anything that we can impart on the older adult community that we interact with that's positive is really, really valuable. So let's look really quickly at the mythology of aging. This is the whole concept of the trouble with assumptions. First of all, depression, sadness, worry, and loneliness are normal in older adults. No, they are not. However, what happens is very often, because of social isolation that can become loneliness, it doesn't always become loneliness. Some people choose to be socially isolated. But when it does become more loneliness, they become depressed or they become sad. And those things become symptoms that really disrupt daily living. So it doesn't happen to everyone, but we have to be careful because it's not something that is normal aging. Physical deterioration is inevitable as we age. Well, some people will say yes, other people will say no. I'm kind of in the middle because I think that physical deterioration can be perceived in many different ways. Some people will see themselves not being able, for example, to play tennis every day or not be able to ski every day as they used to. But we're going to talk a little bit about this coming right up, but it's really all about adapting. So if you find yourself not being able to do what you used to do, then you need to understand what's going on and adapt. Older adults have difficulty remembering and or understanding things. Now, memory is a big issue with older adults, and not everyone has trouble remembering. Very often, older adults, as a normal part of aging, will forget a name. They might actually forget where they put their keys. They might actually forget a word now and then. I know I do. And it takes me a few minutes, but then I usually remember the name or I remember the word. And that's very normal. And as far as understanding things, unless you seriously have a developmental issue, the way we understand things stays the same pretty much throughout our lives. It's not something that just takes a hike when we reach 65. Sometimes it may take us longer as we get older. And I think that because we're in a society of, and everyone talks about this, the me now society, it sort of makes it seem as though if it takes us longer to understand something or to remember something, that's not a good thing. But in essence, it actually is a good thing. And it's nice to be able to have a little time in our lives to absorb things. Sex is rare or impossible as you age. I hear this a lot, and it is absolutely not true. Here again, adaptability is the key. It's interesting, however, that society has spent a lot of time and money working on the way men can continue to have an active sex life up until they, forever. But they haven't spent nearly as much money or time on how they do this with women. So it really is, again, a situation of adaptation. Older adults have difficulty with technology. I have to say that in some cases they do, and in most cases they don't. I think that one thing that COVID taught us was that older adults are adaptable, especially when it comes to engagement, primarily engagement with their families. And by learning certain parts of technology, I'm not saying that we have to be, as if you could see today, we don't have all the answers, and we're not totally adept, but we don't have as much difficulty as people would like to think we do. When we see older adults many times in ads or in the media, in any kind of media, when you're working with technology, you'll see them with their computer, but there's usually a young person sitting next to them or standing behind them or pointing to the screen or the keyboard, saying to them, basically saying and helping them and so on. But doesn't need to be that way. There's a wonderful program called Senior Planet. And if you haven't looked it up or know about it, it is just Google Senior Planet. It's now part of AARP, and it is a program specifically designed for older adults to become more comfortable with technology and more adept at using technology in their daily lives. It's wonderful. I've actually, quote unquote, prescribed it for certain people. It's all online. However, there are in-person programs pretty much around the country. We actually have a license to do it in person here within our clinic. And the older adults that we've worked with have really, really enjoyed it. We've worked with people in nursing homes, we've worked with people in assisted living, and we've worked with people in a therapeutic environment actually within our optimal aging program. This is another thing, that only women need to worry about osteoporosis. That is not true. Men are just as likely to suffer from osteoporosis as women, but it generally goes undiagnosed. Partly because men just inherently are built differently than we are, and their bones, for whatever reason, are a little more solid from the very beginning than ours are. So men would tend to have osteoporosis a little bit later than women do. So very often it's just, just completely set aside, and it's just part of aging. So it doesn't get diagnosed, but it is definitely not just specifically for women. There's no point in giving up smoking, drugs, or drinking now. It's not going to make any difference. Well, to the contrary, it is going to make a difference. As we know, if you give up smoking, the changes, the positive changes in your body occur within weeks of giving up smoking. Drugs, I don't know a lot about using drugs regularly, but I know that there are a lot of people who use pain medication, and now, since marijuana is legal, giving up some of those things will certainly make us healthier. And drinking, it can change, and it doesn't mean that you have to give up all of it. It just means you have to be reasonable about how you do drink and how many drinks you have a day or a week. But there is definitely value to giving them up, or certainly cutting back. Older adults are unattractive and undesirable, and this was something that Ashton talked about. But if you think about it, when older adults are portrayed in commercials, primarily on television, even some in print, they're usually using some sort of an age-reducing cream, or they're, finding different kinds of attire that are more appropriate for their age. And that is just a horrible proliferation of the older adults. It's just awful, because, we are going to change. We are going to get wrinkles. We are going to experience all these things. And we're not unattractive. We're not undesirable. In some cases, I know that people really believe, and I think this is true, that we become more attractive and more desirable. We're smarter. We have more wisdom. We understand life and change much better than our younger counterparts. Feeling lonely is part of getting older. That is not true, because people get lonely primarily either when they self-isolate or by circumstance they are isolated. And if it is by circumstance that they are isolated, there are many ways of engaging them. And this is kind of one of those ways where technology can go hand in hand with forced isolation. In other words, I know a family who moved here from New York City, from Manhattan, and they are now in assisted living in Heber. So now they look out from their window, and what do they see? They see farmland, they see horses, they don't see exciting buildings, they don't very often get a chance to interact with younger people, they don't get it, it's just not the same, and they're not happy. So they're in a situation that they didn't necessarily choose, because their children chose it for them, and they are lonely. So we have to be very careful. It's not normal. It's not a normal part of aging, loneliness, and neither is social isolation. Older adults need less sleep. Now, I don't understand where this one comes from at all, because throughout our lives, we always need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. Even teenagers need it, but they don't get it. But that's the normal amount of sleep that we need to keep ourselves healthy, to keep our brains functioning. Sleep is restorative. So older adults need to get as much sleep as anyone else that is an adult, 7 to 9 hours. And if you can do that, I think that's fantastic. If a family member has or had Alzheimer's disease or dementia, you will have it too. That is also not true. Alzheimer's and most dementias, although they do carry some genetic risk, that's all it is risk. There are genes that have been identified with Alzheimer's specifically, and the way it works is that you can have 1, 2, 3, or generally 4 of those genes. The more you have, the higher your risk for developing Alzheimer's, but it doesn't mean that you're going to. It just means that your risk is higher. And yes, it is in many ways passed down from generation to generation, depending on the risk values of the two people that have married and created a family. So if none of you have, or none of your grandparents have had Alzheimer's, it's very unlikely that you will have it or that your children would have it. And all of this can be checked, as we all know, through genetic testing. And a lot of people who have had it in their families for a couple of generations do get tested. And then once they're tested, they really don't want to know the results because there's nothing they can do about it anyway. So this is also true with other diseases, Lewy body or any of the Parkinson's dementias. They can be passed down from generation to generation, but it's not a foregone conclusion. It is just a risk. Most older adults have difficulty hearing or seeing things. Well, that is one area of becoming older that may decline, and it may decline at different rates. It may decline for different reasons. My husband was a musician and never wore earplugs when he played in the band. So his hearing actually went out pretty young for the most part. And he has hearing aids and he doesn't give it a second thought. So both of these things can be addressed and can be improved when we can get people to get hearing aids or get additional sight tools. For example, magnifying glasses in terms of wearing glasses like readers, or actual magnifying glasses that can help them. And also big print books, audio books if there are really serious sight problems. I mean, there are ways to, I hate to use the word again, adapt. And older adults can't learn new things. That is not the case. We can learn anything we want to learn. It might just take us longer. And older adults don't do anything that is valuable, and they don't add to society. Anyone who really thinks that probably should never become an older adult. Older adults should take it easy and avoid exercise. And a lot of times that's the old adage, well, it's not going to do anything for me now anyway. Oh, that is so untrue. Exercise is exceptionally important throughout our lives, but especially when you become an older adult. We have to keep the chemicals that are formed to keep us healthy and keep our brains working. And we have to keep them flowing and going. And a lot of that has to do with exercise. There is, the recommendation is 150 minutes a week of either aerobic, stretching, and flexibility. Now, they can all be done at the same time if you want, or they can be done separately. But it doesn't mean that you have to do all of it at the same time and do your 150 minutes all at the same time. It's very nice that you can break it out and you still get the same benefits. Some people do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes middle of the day, and 10 minutes at night. That works just fine. Excuse me. I feel so much better. I can stop taking my medication. I hear this a lot. And this is why, unfortunately, we do see a lot of people who felt better and stopped taking their medication. But what they didn't realize is then they're going to feel crappy again like they did when they first came. No one should ever, no one, none of us, and especially older adults, should ever stop taking medication unless they talk to their doctor. That is just not a smart thing to do, regardless of your age, but especially as an older adult. There are reasons that you're taking the medication. If it's not working, that's a different story. But when you're feeling better, there is literally no reason to stop. So overall, most of the myths surrounding aging seem to center on this perception of inevitability. And people believe that it is inevitable that they will gradually crumble into dust as their lives become increasingly unbearable, boring, passionless, and painful. And that is also a very big myth. The most important factor in survival is neither intelligence nor strength. It is adaptability. And this is something that we have to really work on with older adults. And this was Charles Darwin, I mean, many years ago, decades ago. And it's still true now. Experiencing ageism actually affects our mental, our physical, and even our memory. And it can be extremely, as I said before, harmful. And it is an unusually frank, focused exploration of biases that distort society's view of old age. So society itself really picks this up and runs with it. And what happens is that it begins to shape dysfunctional health policies and medical practices, which is not a good, just not a good way of shaping things. The other issue, especially with medicine, is that a lot of times professionals do not know how to engage older adults. They don't know how to speak to them. They speak to their caregiver rather than to the person who's sitting in their office. People who are older become invisible, and that is not the best way to handle people in healthcare. Ageism in healthcare has a lot to do with communication, and communication with healthcare staff and with older adult patients might be very poor. And a lot of this can come from things like Ashton mentioned, elder speak. And elder speak is when the voice gets kind of high and you kind of slow down and you feel like you're talking to your kid, or I related to my dog. That's just not appropriate. Now, I know that a lot of people are now fairly offended by older adults, and by that, by even elder adults who are in their 80s, maybe close to 90, who still use terms like sweetheart and darling and honey, and all of the terms that they were raised with during a time long ago. Now, I think we have to be careful about the context in which we think about these things. This is how they were brought up. It's not how my kids are being brought up, but it's how my grandfather was brought up. And those habits, those patterns of speech, those thought processes are not demeaning whatsoever. They're just simply the way that culture was designed when they grew up. Another thing that we find in healthcare is that very often healthcare workers are less patient with older adults. They are less engaged with them. They kind of shoo them in and shoo them out. And they're much less responsive to the issues raised by the patient. And that is something that I have personally experienced, where they just simply say, oh, well, that's because of age. And I'll sit there and tell them, no, it's not because of age. There is something wrong. And I have no problem doing that. Now, I don't know how many other older adults are like that, but it does help. However, excuse me, there are perks to aging, and we all have to consider these. I think this is the exciting part. The perks to aging have to do with the fact, as Ashton said, we are happier than our counterparts because we have experienced more of life. We are better at making decisions. We are better at acceptance. We are better, for the most part, at adaptability. We have lived a long time. We have wisdom that we need to be able to impart on our younger people. especially in the workplace where we can do that, where it's respected. We also have had the opportunity to build really strong relationships with our friends, with our coworkers, with our families, because we've just plain been around so long. And then we have to remember that there are always wonderful, wonderful things that are better with age. And I think you probably all agree that a good pair of leather shoes, the more you wear them and the older they get, the more comfortable they get. A pair of blue jeans. I mean, nowadays they just make them so they look worn out. And they also get more comfortable and in some cases better looking with age. Trees grow and get beautiful as they age. They branch and they flower and they leaf. Many different types of alcohol get better with age. And this is, people will say, well, it's X number of years old. I still don't understand how somebody can drink something that's like 30 years old, but that's just me. My husband doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't seem to matter, but that gets better with age. Cheese. I mean, you probably would not want cheese if it weren't aged. And wine. Wine definitely gets better with age, regardless of what kind it is. And they have to put the number of years that it was in the bottle when it was bottled and so on. And those things do get better with age. So there's a lot that gets better with age. And this is probably my favorite line from these wonderfully intuitive people, that it's true. We are only given one little spark of madness and we can't lose it. So as we age and as we work with older adults, it's important to build that spark that they have or that they are still looking for, to help them find it. I think that's really part of what we're here for. And this is my absolute favorite saying, which I honestly could not even think about when I was younger. I don't know how many of you know who I am, but I tend to buck the system. And I have done that my whole life. And so learning to go with the flow was very difficult for me, but I have crossed that threshold and now I have accepted it. The piece that you're looking at that says go with the flow in the middle, that piece was made by my mother-in-law, who made it with dryer lint. And that was her primary medium of art as she got older. She was a prolific artist. And she made many, many, many things out of dryer lint. But on the very bottom, I don't know if you can see it, on the very, very bottom, there are all these little pictures. Those are the pictures of the people who provided the lint that went into this piece. And I love it. I love the piece. I love the way it was done. I love the person who did it. And it really does help me to think about slowing down, going with the flow, adapting. I have just a couple things and then we'll get on to the questions. There are certain people whose views of aging, I think, are very poignant. Yoko Ono, who is now 91, she says that some people say they are old when they're 18 and some say they are young when they're 90. You can't define people by whatever society determines as their age. Age is a concept that human beings created. And it's true. We have our chronological age and we have our subjective age. The subjective age is the age that we feel we are. And it could be 35, it could be 40, it could be even younger. That woman said that she felt like she was in her 20s. That's the subjective age, but the chronological age may be well in the 70s or 80s. So we have to be careful about balancing those things. Ringo, who's now 84, says, I feel the older I get, the more I'm learning to handle life, being on this quest for a long time. It's all about finding yourself. Oprah, she says that every year should teach you something valuable. Every year brings you closer to expressing your whole self. I celebrate that. honor it, hold it in reverence. And I am grateful for every age I am blessed to become. De Niro, who is now 81. So here's the thing about aging. You feel it. Aging is something you feel, but it doesn't have to change who you are. You really can't understand aging until you've gone through it. And I will leave you with that thought and stop sharing. There we go. So I do hope there's good questions in the chat or the Q&A. What should I look at first? Let's look at the Q&A. What kind of policy advocacy needs to happen at the state or federal levels to make adaptations for older adults more accessible to increasing our population of older adults? That is an excellent question. And I think that it's something that we have to work with our legislators about. And I know that there are many of them who are actually older adults. There are also many of them who have had really unfortunate experiences with their older adults. And one in particular who is a congressman in the Utah legislature, whose mother passed away in a facility. And he has sued the facility for unlawful death. And it basically was. She was neglected. So we have to be our own best advocates. I think we all understand that. Every time I'm in a situation where I can praise and uplift older adults or add them to a list of a demographic, I do it. And I think we all have to do that. But I think it's really, really important that we do it through the legislature and also through our medical professionals. Could you share some steps we could take to make Salt Lake Valley into a blue zone? Oh boy. We have to get the support of our government, both the state and the local government. I think there are ways that we can do that. And I love the fact that you're referring to blue zones. They are that whole program. If you haven't seen it, I believe it's on cable. I think it might be on Netflix. It's wonderful. And it talks about populations where people are living very fulfilled and they're living to a ripe old ages. In Japan, where it's called ikigami, where you actually have a circle of friends from basically the time you're in school all the way until the time you pass away. And those people get together regularly and share their lives. And it's just incredible. And ikigami means the reason you get up in the morning. So the more we can have purpose and the more we can embrace that, why we get up in the morning and what we do, I think we will have a better opportunity to become a blue zone. The technology, I will put that in the chat right now so I don't forget it. Let's see, is this going to go to everyone? No, hold on. Everyone. Okay, it's Senior Planet, Planet. And all you have to do is just Google that and it'll come up Senior Planet. I don't know if it's an AARP URL or not now, but it's really wonderful. And you can actually get trained in it. There you go. Thank you. seniorplanet.org. Yep. And there's all kinds of trainings you can go through. You can become a licensed in-person provider if you want. Is there a possibility of creating policy to allow Social Security benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, to allow recipients direct payment to caregivers of choice? I would say that there is always a possibility. However, our administration is going to change soon. And in light of that, I would say no. Which is really unfortunate. Do you believe that social workers need tailored training to working with older? Yes, I absolutely. I think that it's very important that not only social workers, but anyone who is going to serve the aging community really needs to be trained. And this goes all the way, for example, I'm doing a training tomorrow for our specific crisis workers here at the university, because many of them get individuals who call or their caregivers call because the person is having a psychotic episode or they're experiencing dementia behaviors that they don't know what to do with. And the people who answer these calls need to know what to say and how to say it and where the resources are. So I think it's extremely important for that type of education. And the woman who runs our optimal aging program is a social worker, and she is amazing. All she's ever wanted to do is work with older adults, and she's phenomenal. I just love her. Let's see. In the chat, what would we find? Where can we find training for working with the aging population? There are many, many trainings out there. It depends on what area of focus you want. There are dementia trainings with the state. There is a program called Dealing with Dementia. There's dementia dialogues. The caregiving program with Rosalind Carter is quite incredible. And she has a whole Rosalind Carter Institute, and that's something that you can look up. There's also the Benjamin Rose Institute that has a lot of training. It's a national, I guess you'd say, repository for trainings, and people register with them, and then people can get into the Benjamin Rose Institute and just pick whatever training they would like. There you go. Thank you. RosalindCarter.org. And then Benjamin Rose, I don't know if it's just the Rose Institute, but that's another one that's a great opportunity, has great opportunities. Let's see. Yes, benrose.org. I should have these memorized since I talk about them so often. Let's see. What else? I can't get my cursor back. Oh, there we go. What other questions are there? Let's see. Medicare has such limits. Yes, they do, and I don't know that that's going to change. I hope they don't create more limits, because everyone deserves to be able to have the same opportunities for care, regardless of what they cost and where they are available. Okay, let's see. Amy, how can we encourage our older patients to expand and strengthen their social support system? I suggest attending the senior center, and they say, but I don't know anyone there. But they say they have no friends and their family members have passed away, or probably not living with them. That's something that's very difficult to dispel with older adults. And it has to be done relatively slowly. It's not like they can just burst into a senior center. They would definitely need some help probably getting adjusted. And a lot of this are excuses that are more deep-seated. There's a reason they don't want to go to the senior center, whether it is because they don't know anyone there, or whether it's because they're embarrassed about perhaps the way they look, or that they wouldn't be able to participate in certain things and be uncomfortable. So when they say that, you really need to go deeper and find out, beyond the fact that they're just using an excuse that they don't have any friends there or they don't know anyone, what is it that's really going on? And sometimes what we do is actually implore them and make it part of their therapy. You need to do this week, and then you're going to come back and report it to us. And you're going to report to, this is a group, but they're going to report on what they thought, what they did, how they interacted, they meet new people. Another thing that older adults can do to engage is to take OSHA classes. And OSHA classes, yes, they do cost money. It's very minimal. And it's just wonderful. There's so much fun. And you meet people, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's in person. You meet a lot of new people. And many of them, generally are well educated, and everybody's looking for some of this interaction. So that's another option. And if they don't feel comfortable going somewhere, they can always do it on Zoom. I've taught classes there that I've had 15, 20 people, and it's really exciting. What are plans to help single seniors with no relatives or caretakers, including LGBTQ? This is they're now called senior orphans. I'm not crazy about that, but that's what the new nomenclature is now. There are a number of organizations that can help these individuals, certainly with the AAAs in the state. They can have people that come and help them do things like their daily activities. They can help them come in and they can do grocery shopping. They can do take them out for a meal. They can come in and cook, do their laundry. So there are a lot of people. However, a lot of people who live alone don't know where to go or what to do. And we get a lot of those kinds of calls. So we have a very comprehensive list of resources, which I'm happy to share. I can send it to Danielle, and it might give you some ideas about, how you can help them to get set up. There usually is someone, either a friend or a neighbor, that can also help. And sometimes they don't want to be called on regularly, but in a pinch, they probably would respond. Let's see. Do you suggest specialist LCSWs or county aging services that can use a limited power of attorney just to pay bills? That would be wonderful. Powers of attorney are very, very often difficult to get, especially for people who have no one in their family, and they do need a guardian. There's a woman who and I'll put this is on our resource list, she's based in St. George, but she has guardian ad litems in every county of the state of Utah, and contacting her can put people in touch with them, and they can help them find the right way to go about doing it. And most people who need guardianship very often are not aware of it, are in denial, they're negative, but they really need it. And it can be a long process, unfortunately. However, there is a process for people to get emergency guardianship for, don't ask me why, 29 days, not 30 days, not 31 days, but 29 days. During that time, you can actually apply for permanent guardianship if you need it. And powers of attorney for both financial and medical decision-making is extremely important. And I know the VA has what they call an authorized caregiver status, and it is sanctioned by the federal government. But we have to do a little bit more if we're not in that realm of the VA. We have to go a little bit further. But I strongly recommend that one of the things that you do first with older adults is to get them to do their advanced planning. And most of them, when they realize what happens if they don't do it, become interested in doing it. It's extremely important, especially if they have family. Challenges to manage mental health and physical health medications and recommendations is how to vet the prescribers. Well, that's a hard one, especially when with mental health. It's very important, as I said, that they continue on their medication unless it is changed by their prescriber. There are people who go from prescriber to prescriber to prescriber to prescriber to get the medications that they really think they need, so they don't have to get off of them. We get calls almost, probably 2-3 times a week that people will call us and say, my primary care provider will not renew my benzos or will not renew whatever it is, and they're looking for someone to prescribe it. Absolutely not. If they are not taking them and they haven't taken them, then we're not going to prescribe them. And if they are taking them and they need a refill, we are not going to prescribe it until we see them, meet with them, talk to their primary care provider. So it takes a little bit of work, but it's something that's extremely important. There was a woman in Cache County who kept going to different prescribers and just kept getting her medications refilled. Well, finally, we got the word out that she was not allowed to do that. So the mental health district up there actually agreed to go to her house, monitor her medications. So she didn't have any in her house. She only got what was given to her by the mental health district. And they would go there 2 or 3 times a day for about 3 or 4 months, just to make sure she was taking the right things in the right order and in the right dosage. And she apparently is doing quite well. So that was a win. Are you aware of any community resources that can help, make modifications such as grab bars, bathrooms, to help them safely stay in their homes? Yes. Your AAAs will have resources that they can do home visits. And there are a number of other organizations, Care Patrol, the names escape me, that will go and do home visits for these individuals. And pretty soon, it's not going to be, nobody has to pay for it. There's also money coming down the pipe with Medicare that will actually pay for some of these changes that they need, the modifications. So there are a number of resources, but I would first check with the AAA in wherever you're located, because they do have people that will do that. And intergenerational support for programs, that's the best. That's absolutely the best. We do try and do intergenerational programming whenever we can. The issue that we have found is it's really hard to get the younger people engaged with older adults on a regular basis. And anybody's welcome to call me. There's a program called Opening Minds Through Art, OMA, and you want to look that up. It's OMA, it's Scripps, SCRIPPSOMA.org. And it's out of Miami University in Ohio. And it's a fantastic program, which includes older adults and younger people through this whole art program. I did the training, and it kind of gives you chills when you do it. It's just amazing. If there are any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I'm going to have to go. Did you record this? Because I want to go through this and look at some of these other questions too.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. We did record it. Are you okay if we share your email address for people who might want to reach out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You want me to put it in the chat?
That would be fantastic. As you're seeing, you're already getting lots of really positive comments from people who appreciate the presentation.
Good. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties.
It happens to all of us.
Another older adult challenged by technology.
It happens all the time. Let me say, I just thank you so much for being here and joining us today.
Pleasure.
I'd like to join. Oh, thank you. I'm glad. To everybody who also joined in the audience today, thank you so much. If you're seeking continuing education hours, please watch your email in the coming days. You'll get a link to the recorded presentation and then the quiz. And upon completing that, then you'll get a confirmation of CEU hours through your email. I'd also like to say we hope you will join us throughout the rest of the academic year as we delve into more presentations addressing major challenges our society is facing. You can visit our college webpage for more information. And then Danielle will also make sure that that's provided in the chat. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for being a part of this event. Please join us for our other events. You can always find recordings of our past events also. And with that, I'll say be kind, be safe, be well, and age well. And thank you so much, Ann, for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.